Starving alien girl cried for food. Her older sister chose to sell herself to a human. The airlock hissed open, and Jace Meridian's helmet display lit up with the wrong kind of readings. Breathable atmosphere, functioning life support, heat signatures. Someone was alive on this wreck. He pulled himself through the breach, magnetic boots clanking against the warped hull plating. The derelict freighter had been drifting for weeks, according to the salvage beacon. Plenty of time for any crew to be long dead or evacuated. His pulse rifle swung on its tether as he swept the corridor with his suit light. No bodies, no blood, just the eerie quiet of a ship that should have been a tomb. The heat signatures were coming from the cargo bay. Jace moved carefully, years of frontier experience keeping his breathing steady. Pirates sometimes used false distress beacons to lure salvagers into ambushes, but as he reached the bay doors and pried them open with his suit's servo assists, he found something that made him freeze. Two figures huddled against the far bulkhead, wrapped in thermal blankets that had lost most of their effectiveness days ago. The larger one held the smaller protectively, and even from across the bay, he could see they were in bad shape. Not human. The proportions were wrong, the skin tone a pale silver blue that caught his light like moonlight on water. The larger one's eyes snapped open, vertical pupils and irises that swirled with bioluminescent gold. She moved with startling speed despite her obvious weakness, positioning herself between him and the smaller figure. "Stay back," she said, her voice carrying the melodic accent of the Velasan core worlds, though her galactic standard was perfect. Jace raised his hands slowly, letting the rifle hang loose. "I'm not here to hurt you. I picked up your beacon." "We sent no beacon." "The ship did. Automatic distress signal when life support started failing." He took a cautious step forward, getting a better look at them. The smaller one, barely more than a child, lay unconscious, her breathing shallow. "How long have you been without food?" The older one's jaw tightened, her elegant features sharpening with desperation and pride warring behind her eyes. 11 days. Christ. Jace had seen starvation before, in the belt stations during the resource wars. 11 days meant they were close to the edge, especially the kid. "My ship's docked at your port airlock. I have supplies, medical gear. Let me help." "Why?" The question came out flat, suspicious. "We have nothing to trade. Our cargo was seized, our credits frozen. You gain nothing." Jace studied her for a long moment. Velisan military bearing, even half-starved and desperate. The way she held herself, the tactical positioning, she'd been trained to fight, to command. But none of that training was helping her now. "Maybe I don't need to gain anything." Her laugh was bitter, a sound like crystal chiming. "Everyone needs something. That's how the galaxy works." She shifted slightly, and he saw the way her hand trembled from the effort of staying upright. "State your price, human." The word carried weight, like she was testing him. Jace had operated in Velasan space long enough to know their reputation, a rigid society built on logic, duty, and carefully maintained distance from other species. Physical contact outside their own kind was considered base, almost primitive. Which made what he was about to offer either brilliant or insane. "There's an old protocol," he said carefully. "From first contact over a century ago. It's still technically legal code in most systems, though nobody uses it anymore." "I know of no such protocol." "Most people don't. It was buried deep in the archives, forgotten." He moved closer, slowly, until he could see the patterns of bioluminescence tracing along her collarbones, dim from malnutrition. It allowed for cultural exchange between humans and other species, including Velasans. Her eyes narrowed. "What kind of exchange?" "Companionship, in return for resources and protection." He held her gaze, making sure she understood. "Intimate companionship." The silence stretched between them, broken only by the younger one's labored breathing. He watched emotions flicker across her face. Shock, disgust, anger. Then something else. Calculation. "You're proposing I sell myself to you." "I'm proposing an arrangement that benefits both of us. Your sister gets food, medicine, safety. You get the same, plus my protection until you're back on your feet. And you get a Velasan whore in your bed." The crudeness was intentional, meant to shock him or herself. He wasn't sure which. Jace didn't flinch. I get a partner who chooses to be there under terms we both agree to. That's the protocol. Choice, agreement, mutual benefit. She looked down at the unconscious girl in her arms. Her hand smoothed over silver blue hair with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with her military posture. Kira is 15 cycles old. She has done nothing wrong. Our family's accounts were seized due to political accusations we cannot fight. I took her and ran, but we didn't get far enough. Her voice remained steady, but he could hear the exhaustion underneath. She's dying. Then let me help her. At what cost to myself? Jace crouched down, bringing himself to eye level. Up close, he could see the sharp angles of her face, the way her bone structure suggested both fragility and strength. Beautiful in a way that was distinctly not human, distinctly other. The cost is time and trust. However long the arrangement lasts, I won't lie and say there isn't a physical component. That's part of the protocol. But I'm not looking for a slave or a victim. If you agree, you're choosing this. Her fingers trembled against her sister's hair. My people don't engage in such things with aliens. We don't touch. We don't share ourselves that way. You're asking me to violate everything I was taught about dignity and propriety. I'm asking you to save your sister's life. He straightened, giving her space. I'll start carrying her to my ship. You can decide while I work, but decide fast. She doesn't have much time. He moved toward them, and the older one tensed. For a moment he thought she might actually fight him despite her weakness. Then she shifted aside, letting him gather the girl carefully. Kira was light, too light, her skin cool to the touch. He could feel her ribs through the thin clothing. The walk back to his ship was silent except for their footsteps and the older one's careful breathing as she followed. She moved like a ghost, professionally quiet despite her exhausted state. When they reached the airlock connecting his vessel to the derelict, she finally spoke. What's your name? Jace Meridian. I am Sienna Velrith, lieutenant of the Velisan 7th Fleet, formerly. She paused as he cycled the airlock. If I agree to this protocol, how long does it last? Until either party chooses to terminate it or until the debt is satisfied. Given your situation, I'd say minimum 3 months to get you both healthy and establish some resources. 3 months of serving your desires. 3 months of sharing close quarters with someone who will make sure you both survive. He looked back at her as the inner door opened, revealing his ship's surprisingly clean interior. I'm not going to pretend the physical part isn't real, but I'm also not going to treat you like property. That's not how this works. Sienna stepped into his ship, her eyes taking in every detail with tactical precision. He could see her evaluating exits, potential weapons, the layout, good survival instincts. You keep saying protocol like it's some official document. Where did you even hear of this? Found it in an old data archive when I was researching trade law loopholes. Seemed too specific to be fabricated, so I kept the reference. He carried Kira toward the medical bay, a converted cargo space with surprisingly sophisticated equipment. Never thought I'd actually use it. He laid the girl on the medical bed, and Sienna immediately moved to her side. Her hands checked pulse points, swept silver hair back from a too-pale face. The bioluminescent patterns along Kira's skin had gone almost dark. Jace pulled out a medical scanner, running it over the girl's vitals. The readouts weren't good, but they weren't impossible. Severe malnutrition, dehydration, and her electrolytes are shot. But her organs haven't started shutting down yet. She can recover if we start treatment now. He reached for an IV kit, but Sienna's hand caught his wrist. Her grip was weak but determined, her skin cool against his. If I refuse your protocol, will you still help her? The question hung in the air. Jace met those strange, swirling eyes and saw the real question underneath. Are you a good person, or just another exploiter with better marketing? Yes, he said simply. I'll help her regardless, but I'm offering you both more than just emergency care. I'm offering you a way forward, resources to rebuild. That part requires the protocol. Sienna's hand fell away. She looked at her sister, then back at him, and something shifted in her expression. Not acceptance yet, but the beginning of a decision. Start treating her. I'll give you my answer when she's stable. Jace nodded and went to work. He'd done field medicine before, though Velisan physiology required careful adjustments. Sienna watched every move, her tactical mind clearly cataloging his competence or lack thereof. When he slid the IV needle into Kira's arm and started the drip of hydration and nutrients, the younger girl's breathing eased almost immediately. She'll need real food once she wakes, but this will stabilize her for now. He adjusted the flow rate, then pulled out a thermal blanket, an actual insulated one, not the emergency foil. You should rest, too. I need to watch her. You need to not collapse. There's a chair right there. He pointed to the seat beside the medical bed. I'm going to prep some food. Real food, not ration bars. He left them there and moved to the small galley. His ship wasn't large, a heavily modified scout vessel with extended range and cargo capacity, but he'd made it comfortable during his years of solo operation. As he heated protein stew and sliced fresh bread from his last station stop, he could feel Sienna's eyes on him from the medical bay doorway. You live well for a salvager, she observed. I'm good at what I do. He portioned the food onto 2 plates, then poured water into clean glasses. And I pick my jobs carefully. Jobs like this, finding desperate aliens to proposition? Jobs like salvaging derelicts that might have valuable cargo or data, finding you was pure chance. He set the plates on the small table. Sit, eat slowly or you'll make yourself sick. Sienna moved to the table with the careful precision of someone operating on fumes and willpower. When she sat, her posture remained military straight despite her exhaustion. She stared at the food like she didn't quite believe it was real. Eat, Jace said again, gentler this time. She picked up the spoon with trembling fingers and took a small bite. Her eyes closed, and for just a moment, the rigid control cracked. She took another bite, then another, forcing herself to go slow. They ate in silence for a while. Jace watched her carefully, noting the way color started to return to her skin, the way the bioluminescent patterns along her neck brightened slightly. Beautiful, in an alien way that was meant to be forbidden. I accept your protocol, Sienna said quietly, setting down her spoon. 3 months, full terms, whatever you require. Jace leaned back in his chair. What changed your mind? You helped Kira before I agreed. That tells me you're not completely without honor. She met his eyes directly. And I have no other options. At least this way, I choose my fate rather than waiting for it to choose me. Fair enough. He stood and moved to a storage locker, pulling out a data pad. The formal terms require both parties to acknowledge understanding and consent. I'll send you the legal text. He transferred the file to her pad, watching as she read through it with the focused intensity of someone who'd spent years reviewing military contracts. Her eyes widened slightly as she scrolled. This is extensive, detailed. Told you it seemed too specific to be fabricated. It references cultural integration protocols, biological compatibility studies, long-term cohabitation guidelines. She looked up at him, confusion flickering across her features. This reads like a diplomatic treaty, not a simple exchange contract. I noticed that too. Weird, right? For something that supposedly never existed. Sienna scrolled further, then froze. Her fingers tightened on the datapad, knuckles paling. What is it? Jace asked. She turned the pad toward him, pointing to a section near the bottom. There, partially corrupted but still visible, was a header in both Galactic Standard and Old Velisan script. Below it, a series of signatures and seals, human diplomatic corps on one side, Velisan High Command on the other. Dated over a century ago. From first contact. This isn't just a protocol, Sienna whispered. This is a treaty, an actual official treaty between our species. Her eyes lifted to his, and he saw genuine shock there. How is this possible? Why have I never heard of this? Why does no one know? Jace took the pad, studying the corrupted text more carefully. His mind raced through implications, through possibilities. If this was real, if humans and Velisans had actually negotiated formal cultural integration at first contact, why had it been buried? I don't know, he admitted. But I think we just stumbled onto something a lot bigger than a simple survival arrangement. Sienna stood slowly, moving back toward the medical bay where her sister slept. She stopped in the doorway, her hand resting on the frame, her profile sharp and elegant against the soft lights. "I came here to sell myself to save Kira," she said softly. "But I think you're right. This is something else entirely." She turned back to face him, and in her eyes he saw the beginning of a question that would change both their lives. "What happened to our treaty, Jace Meridian, and who didn't want us to find it?" Part 2. Jace woke to the sound of quiet movement in the medical bay. Through the half-open door, he could see Sienna sitting beside her sister's bed, one hand resting protectively on Kira's arm. The girl was still sleeping, but her breathing had evened out, and the bioluminescent patterns on her skin glowed softly in the dim light. He'd given Sienna the crew quarters, small but private, while he took the pilot's chair for the night. Not the most comfortable sleep he'd ever had, but he'd made the offer and wasn't about to push the physical arrangement until she was ready. Rising quietly, he moved through his pre-flight routine. They couldn't stay docked to the derelict forever. He'd already filed the salvage claim, but other operators would be scanning for opportunities, and he didn't want company. "Where are we going?" He turned to find Sienna in the doorway, watching him work the navigation console. She'd cleaned up somehow, her hair swept back from her face, though the exhaustion still showed in the shadows under her eyes. "Out of the main shipping lanes. There's a scattered asteroid cluster about 6 hours from here. Good place to lay low while your sister recovers and we figure out what to do with that treaty information." "You believe it's real, then, not just some clerical error or propaganda piece?" The signatures looked authentic. The legal language was too specific, too detailed to be fabricated. He pulled up a star chart, highlighting their route. "But I'm no historian. We'd need access to proper archives to verify it." Sienna moved closer, studying the navigation display with the focused attention of someone who'd been trained in fleet operations. She pointed to a marker near their destination. "That cluster is marked as contested territory. Pirates use it as a staging ground. Which is why legitimate traffic avoids it. We'll be safe there for a while." He glanced at her. "Unless you'd rather head straight to a station and take our chances with whoever froze your assets." Her jaw tightened. "No. The accusations against my family were politically motivated. Going public now would only endanger Kira further." She paused. "You're putting yourself at risk by helping us. If the Velosan authorities discover you're harboring fugitives..." "They won't. And even if they did, I operate in spaces where their authority is more suggestion than law." He initiated the undocking sequence, feeling the familiar thunk of magnetic clamps releasing. "Besides, we have an arrangement now. That means your problems are my problems for the next 3 months." The ship pulled away from the derelict, and Jace guided them into open space with practiced ease. Sienna remained standing behind him, close enough that he could feel her presence, the subtle coolness of her body temperature. "About that arrangement," she said quietly, "when does the physical component begin?" Jace kept his hands steady on the controls, giving her time to find her words. "Whenever you're ready. There's no schedule, Sienna. This isn't a transaction where I demand payment up front." "But it is a transaction, we've established that." "It's an agreement between 2 people. That makes it whatever we decide it is." He engaged the autopilot and turned to face her. "You're exhausted. You're worried about your sister, and you've just had your entire world upended. I'm not going to add to that stress." She studied him with those unsettling gold-swirled eyes, and he could practically see her mind working, trying to understand him through the lens of her rigid cultural framework. "In my society, physical intimacy serves a reproductive function. It's clinical, scheduled, appropriate. What you're describing is something else entirely. Yeah, for humans it can be a lot of things. Connection, pleasure, trust, comfort. Sometimes it's casual, sometimes it's profound. Depends on the people involved." "And which would this be?" The question held genuine curiosity rather than challenge. Jace stood, closing some of the distance between them. She didn't retreat, though he saw her shoulders tense slightly. "That depends on what you want it to be. The protocol requires participation, but it doesn't dictate how we approach it." He reached out slowly, giving her time to move away, and brushed his fingers along her arm. Her skin was cool, smooth, the texture subtly different from human. Has anyone ever touched you like this, without clinical purpose? No, the word came out barely above a whisper. Physical contact outside reproduction or medical necessity is considered inappropriate for Velisons. It clouds judgment, creates emotional complications. Maybe that's the point. Her eyes snapped to his, sharp and questioning. Jace let his hand fall away, giving her space. Your people built a society on logic and distance. Humans built ours on messy, complicated connections. Maybe that's why this treaty existed, to bridge that gap. He moved past her toward the galley. Come on, your sister will wake soon and she'll need proper food. Sienna followed him, though he could feel her confusion radiating like heat. She settled at the table while he prepared a simple meal. Eggs, toast, fresh fruit from his hydroponics bay. Luxury items in deep space, but he'd learned early that good food made long hauls bearable. You're not what I expected, she said as he worked. What did you expect? Someone cruder, more demanding. The stories we hear about human traders in the frontier regions paint them as barely civilized opportunists. Jace cracked eggs into a heated pan, the familiar sizzle filling the small galley. Some of them are, but most of us are just trying to make a living in the spaces between civilized systems. You learn quickly that reputation matters more than quick profits. And your reputation includes rescuing starving aliens and proposing ancient treaties? My reputation includes being someone who can be trusted to keep his word and handle unusual situations with discretion. He plated the food and set it in front of her. Eat. You need to rebuild your strength. They ate together, and slowly he watched Sienna begin to relax. The military rigidity eased from her shoulders, and she ate with more enjoyment than simple necessity. When she finished, she leaned back in her chair and studied him openly. What made you become a salvager? You have education. I can hear it in how you speak. You have resources beyond what most frontier traders possess. Why choose this life? Freedom, mostly. I spent 5 years in Earth's exploration corps, following orders and mapping systems for bureaucrats who'd never leave the core worlds. When my contract ended, I took my severance, bought this ship, and never looked back. You don't miss structure, purpose? I have purpose, it's just mine now, not someone else's. Something flickered across her face, understanding maybe, or envy. Before she could respond, a soft sound came from the medical bay. Both of them turned toward it. Kira was awake. Sienna moved faster than he'd seen her move before, crossing to her sister's side in seconds. Jace followed more slowly, giving them space. The girl's eyes, the same gold-swirled vertical pupils as her sister, blinked in confusion as she took in the unfamiliar surroundings. Sienna, her voice was hoarse, weak. Where are we? Safe. We're safe. Sienna's hand smoothed over her sister's hair with infinite gentleness. This is Jace Meridian. He found us on the derelict and brought us to his ship. Kira's gaze shifted to him, wary and assessing despite her weakness. Smart kid. She asked. Because you needed help, Jace said simply. He moved to the medical console, checking her vitals. Much improved, though she'd need several more days of careful nutrition and rest. How do you feel? Hungry, tired, confused. She tried to sit up, but Sienna gently pressed her back down. The ship? Did it send a distress beacon? Are authorities coming? No authorities, just automated systems. He filled a glass with water and handed it to Sienna, who helped her sister drink. You're both safe here. Kira's eyes narrowed slightly, a sharp intelligence working behind them despite her condition. Nothing is free in the frontier. What do you want in exchange? Sienna and Jace exchanged a glance. The girl was perceptive, reading the situation with the same tactical awareness as her sister. Your sister and I have an arrangement, Jace said carefully. She'll explain it to you when you're stronger. For now, focus on recovering. What kind of arrangement? Kira's hand found Sienna's, gripping it. What did you have to promise him? Nothing you need to worry about, Sienna said firmly. I made a choice to ensure our survival. That's all that matters. But Kira wasn't satisfied. Her gaze moved between them, reading body language and implications with uncomfortable accuracy. When her eyes landed back on Jace, they held something between distrust and resignation. She agreed to the old protocols, didn't she? the ones from the forbidden histories. Jace felt his eyebrows rise. You know about them? I read things I'm not supposed to. Our family's private archives had fragments of pre-Empire texts before they were seized. She looked at her sister with something like sadness. You didn't have to do that for me. Yes, I did. Sienna's voice held absolute conviction, and I'd do it again without hesitation. The girl's eyes welled up, but she blinked the tears back with visible effort. Jace moved away from the bed, giving them privacy, but Kira's voice stopped him. Thank you for helping us, even if the price is steep. He turned back, meeting her gaze. The price is what we make it. Your sister isn't my prisoner, and neither are you. This ship is small, but it's safe, and while you're here, no one will hurt you. Something in his tone must have convinced her, because she nodded slowly and settled back against the pillows. Sienna pulled the thermal blanket higher, tucking it around her sister with practiced care. Rest now. I'll bring you food when you're ready. Kira's eyes were already drifting closed, exhaustion reclaiming her. Sienna stayed by her side until the girl's breathing evened into sleep, then rose and followed Jace back to the common area. She knows more than I realized, Sienna said quietly, about the protocols, about human Velisan history. Smart kid. How much did she read in those archives? I don't know. Our family's collection was extensive before the seizure. Documents from the early contact period, pre-Empire treaties, cultural studies. She settled into a chair, her movements more fluid now that food and rest had taken the edge off her exhaustion. If she found references to the protocols, there might have been other information, too. Jace pulled up the data pad containing the treaty document they'd found the previous night. Do you think she'd know how to verify this, or where we might find more complete records? Sienna took the pad, scrolling through the text again, her brow furrowed in concentration. There are archive stations scattered throughout the neutral zones, places where historical records from multiple species are stored for academic purposes. The nearest one is about 3 days from here. She looked up at him, but accessing restricted historical files would require credentials we don't have. Or the right motivation to break some rules. A smile ghosted across her lips, the first genuine expression of amusement he'd seen from her. You're suggesting we break into an archive station? I'm suggesting we investigate a historical document that might explain why an entire treaty between our species was buried and forgotten. He leaned against the console, arms crossed. Don't you want to know why? Of course I do. But breaking into a neutral zone facility would attract exactly the kind of attention we're trying to avoid. Not if we're clever about it. And you're military trained. I'm betting you know your way around security systems. She studied him for a long moment, and he could see her weighing risks against potential benefits. 3 days gives Kira time to recover enough for travel. We'd need a cover story, false credentials, and a plan for if things go wrong. So that's a yes? That's a maybe pending proper planning. She stood, moving closer to him, close enough that he could see the intricate patterns of bioluminescence tracing along her collarbones, brighter now after food and rest. But first, we should address the other component of our arrangement. Jace felt his pulse quicken slightly. You don't have to rush into anything. I'm not rushing, I'm being practical. Her hand lifted, hovering near his chest but not quite touching. You've kept your word so far, provided resources, shown care for Kira, treated me with respect despite having every advantage. That deserves acknowledgement. I've spent my entire life following protocols, maintaining appropriate distance, suppressing anything that might be considered emotional weakness. Her hand finally made contact, palm flat against his chest, feeling his heartbeat. Maybe it's time I learned what exists beyond those boundaries. Jace covered her hand with his own, feeling the temperature difference between them, her cool skin against his warmth. This isn't just about following the protocol's requirements. If we do this, I want you present, not just compliant. I don't know how to be what you're asking. Then let me show you. He drew her closer, slow enough that she could resist if she wanted. She didn't. Instead, she came to him with something between curiosity and determination, her free hand finding his shoulder. This close, he could smell something faintly sweet about her, like night-blooming flowers. "My people don't kiss," she said quietly. "We consider it unhygienic, the exchange of biological matter for non-reproductive purposes." "Your people sound like they're missing out." He cupped her face gently, thumbs tracing the line of her jaw. Her skin was impossibly smooth, the bone structure elegant and sharp. When he leaned in, she held perfectly still, neither pulling away nor leaning into it. Their lips met softly, and he felt her startle slightly at the contact. He kept it gentle, exploratory, giving her time to adjust to the sensation. After a moment, she made a small sound, surprise, maybe, or something else, and her hand tightened on his shoulder. When he pulled back, her eyes were wide, pupils dilated, the bioluminescent patterns along her neck glowing brighter. "That's not what I expected," she breathed. "What did you expect?" "Something more invasive, clinical." Her fingers touched her own lips, testing. "That was neither of those things." "That was just a kiss, Sienna, the beginning." He could see her processing, her tactical mind trying to catalog and categorize an experience that didn't fit her existing framework. Then something shifted in her expression, a decision made. "Show me more," she said. Jace smiled and drew her toward his quarters, the door sliding shut behind them with a soft hiss. The space was small, dominated by a bed that was larger than standard for a solo operator. He'd always preferred comfort over storage. Sienna stood in the center of the room, her posture unconsciously military despite the situation. He moved behind her slowly, giving her time to adjust to his presence in her space. "Tell me if anything is too much," he said quietly, his hands settling on her shoulders. She nodded, and he felt the tension radiating through her muscles. He worked slowly, fingers finding knots and pressure points, easing the strain of too many days of stress and fear. Gradually, she began to relax under his touch, her breathing deepening. "We approach physical intimacy as something separate from emotion," she said after a while. "Efficient, purposeful, but you're treating this like it matters beyond the biological function." "Because it does." His hand slid down her arms, then around to her waist, pulling her back against him. "Connection isn't just about bodies, Sienna. It's about trust, vulnerability, being fully present with someone." "I don't know if I can do that." "You're already doing it. You're here, letting me touch you, opening yourself to something your entire culture says is wrong." He turned her gently to face him. "That takes courage." Her hands came up between them, resting against his chest. He could feel her exploring, fingers tracing the muscles underneath his shirt with clinical curiosity that slowly transformed into something else. "Your skin is warmer than mine," she observed. "Different texture. The bone structure is similar, but the proportions are off." "We're different species, that's part of what makes this interesting." She looked up at him, and he saw vulnerability there beneath the tactical assessment. "I'm afraid I'll disappoint you, that I won't know how to be what this protocol requires." Jace cupped her face again, making sure she was looking directly at him. "You can't disappoint me by being honest about what you're feeling, and you don't need to perform or pretend, just be here with me. That's enough." Something in her expression cracked, and he saw the weight she'd been carrying, the responsibility for her sister, the shame of their situation, the fear of inadequacy. He drew her into an embrace, and after a moment's hesitation, she let herself lean against him. They stood like that for a long moment, just holding each other. No demands, no expectations. Just two people finding comfort in contact that their respective societies would view very differently. "I'm not ready for everything," she said quietly against his shoulder. "Not yet." "That's fine, we have time." She pulled back enough to look at him, her hands still resting against his chest. "But I am ready for more than just standing here." Jace smiled and guided her toward the bed. They settled together, and he showed her what touch could be when it wasn't clinical or purposeful. Just the pleasure of skin on skin, the building warmth of genuine desire, the surprising intimacy of learning someone else's body. She was hesitant at first, following his lead with the careful precision of someone learning new tactics. But gradually, as he drew responses from her that she clearly hadn't known she was capable of, she began to relax into it. Her cool skin warmed under his hands, and the bioluminescent patterns across her body flared brighter with each new sensation. When she finally gasped his name, the rigid control shattering into something raw and genuine, he held her through it, showing her that vulnerability wasn't weakness. Afterward, she lay against him, her breathing gradually slowing. Her fingers traced idle patterns on his chest, and he could practically feel her mind working through everything that had just happened. "That was nothing like what I was taught intimacy should be," she said finally. "Better or worse?" "Different, overwhelming, intense in ways that have nothing to do with biology." She propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at him. "Is it always like that for humans?" "When there's genuine chemistry and both people are present, it can be." She settled back against him, and they lay in comfortable silence for a while. Eventually, Jace felt her breathing even out into sleep, exhaustion finally claiming her now that her sister was safe and some of her immediate burdens had been shared. He stayed awake longer, staring at the ceiling and thinking about treaties buried for a century, about the woman sleeping against him, and about the feeling that they'd stumbled onto something far more significant than either of them had anticipated. His console chimed softly, a proximity alert. They were approaching the asteroid cluster, and he needed to navigate them to a secure position. Carefully, he extracted himself from Sienna's embrace and dressed. When he reached the cockpit, he pulled up the sensor data and felt his stomach drop. There was a ship in the cluster, not a pirate vessel or another salvager. A Velasan military scout, running silent, positioned exactly where he'd been planning to hide. And its sensors had already tagged them. Jace cut the engines and let momentum carry them deeper into the asteroid field. The Velasan scout hadn't moved, hadn't hailed them, just sat there in the shadows like a predator waiting to see what its prey would do. He pulled up the weapons systems, basic defensive arrays, nothing that could stand against military-grade hardware, and plotted 3 escape vectors. None of them were good. Soft footsteps behind him. Sienna appeared in the doorway, hastily dressed, her expression sharp and alert despite having been asleep moments ago. "What's wrong?" "Velisan scout, dead ahead, running silent." He gestured to the sensor display. "Could be coincidence, but I don't believe in coincidences." She moved to his side, studying the readout with professional efficiency. Her fingers flew across the console, pulling up ship classifications and tactical data. "That's a Raptor-class scout. Long-range sensors, stealth capabilities, usually assigned to intelligence operations." Her jaw tightened. "They're looking for something specific." Or someone. Their eyes met, and he saw her reach the same conclusion he had. "They tracked us from the derelict," she said. "They've been following since you picked us up. Question is, do they want you or that treaty document we found?" Before she could answer, the comm system crackled to life. A voice spoke in clipped Velasan, which Sienna translated in a whisper. "Unidentified human vessel, you are harboring fugitives from Velasan justice. Power down and prepare for boarding." Jace's hand moved to the engine controls, but Sienna caught his wrist. "Wait, I know that voice." She leaned toward the comm. "Commander Talris, what a disappointing surprise." A pause, then the voice switched to Galactic Standard, carrying an edge of satisfaction. "Lieutenant Velrith, I'd hoped you died quietly in the dark. Would have been cleaner for everyone." "Cleaner for the politicians who fabricated charges against my family, you mean?" "The charges are legitimate. Your father's research threatened state security. You and your sister are loose ends that need resolution." Sienna's hand tightened on the console, her bioluminescent patterns flickering with what Jace was learning to recognize as anger. "My father's research was historical analysis. He threatened no one. He threatened the established order. He asked questions about first contact, about treaties that were better left forgotten." Talris's tone shifted, becoming almost conversational. "Surrender yourself and the girl. The human can go free. He's just an opportunistic salvager who got caught in the middle." Jace activated his own comm. "The opportunistic salvager has something to say about that. These people are under my protection. You want them, you go through me." Talris laughed, a sound like breaking ice. "Noble, stupid but noble. You're outgunned, outmaneuvered, and out of options. Power down now, or I'll disable your ship and take what I want from the wreckage. Sienna's hand found Jace's shoulder, squeezing once. When he looked at her, she was studying the asteroid field with calculating intensity. The Raptor class has superior weapons and sensors, but it's built for open space operations. In a dense field like this, maneuverability matters more than firepower. Her eyes met his. Can you fly this ship through terrain that would make a military pilot nervous? How nervous are we talking? Suicidally nervous. Jace grinned despite the situation. Strap in. He killed the running lights and fired the engines at full burn, diving toward the densest part of the asteroid cluster. Behind them, the scout's sensors lit up, tracking their movement. Weapon locks painted his hull. Kira, Sienna called toward the medical bay. Secure yourself. The first shot went wide, superheated plasma scorching past their starboard side. Jace threw the ship into a rolling dive, using a tumbling asteroid as cover. The scout followed, but Sienna had been right. Its larger frame struggled with the tight maneuvering. There, Sienna pointed to a gap between two massive rocks. If we can reach that canyon system, their sensors will have trouble maintaining lock. Jace aimed for the gap, asteroid debris pinging off their shields. Another shot, closer this time, clipping their aft deflector. Warning lights flared across his console. Shields at 60%, he reported. Keep going 20 more seconds. They plunged into the canyon, walls of ancient rock flashing past on either side. Jace flew by instinct and reflexes, trusting his hands to react faster than his mind could process. Sienna remained perfectly still beside him, calling out obstacles and adjustments with military precision. The scout fell back, unable to follow into the narrow passage, but that didn't mean they were safe. They'll circle around, try to catch us at the exit point, Sienna said. We need to lose them completely. Working on it. The canyon branched, and Jace took the smaller passage, barely wide enough for his ship. Rocks scraped against their hull, and alarms screamed about structural stress. But they emerged into a hollow space, a natural cave inside a larger asteroid, shielded from external sensors by dense mineral deposits. Jace cut all non-essential systems, running on minimal power. In the darkness, only the soft glow of emergency lighting and Sienna's bioluminescent patterns provided illumination. They waited in silence, hardly breathing. On the passive sensors, they watched the scout pass their position, searching. Minutes stretched like hours. Finally, the military vessel moved away, heading deeper into the field. They'll keep searching, Sienna whispered. Talrus doesn't give up easily. Then we wait until they expand their search pattern, then slip out the other direction. Jace pulled up a three-dimensional map of the asteroid field. There's an exit vector here that should keep us hidden if we time it right. A sound from the medical bay made them both turn. Kira appeared in the doorway, one hand braced against the frame for support, her face pale but determined. I heard the conversation with Talrus. He mentioned Father's research. Her eyes found Sienna's. They know about the treaty, don't they? That's what this is really about. Sienna moved to her sister, guiding her to a seat. You should be resting. I should be helping. Father spent years researching First Contact history. He found something important enough that they destroyed our family to hide it. Kira's hand gripped Sienna's. The treaty document you found, I need to see it. Jace pulled up the file on the datapad and handed it to her. The girl's eyes scanned the text with remarkable speed, her expression shifting from curiosity to understanding to something like horror. This isn't just a cultural exchange protocol, she said slowly. Look at the dates. Look at the context references. She expanded a section of the corrupted text, pointing to fragments that Jace had dismissed as damage artifacts. These references suggest the treaty was negotiated after a conflict, a war between humans and Velisons that lasted less than a year but was devastating enough to force both sides to the negotiating table. Sienna leaned closer, reading over her sister's shoulder. That's impossible. The official histories say First Contact was peaceful. Trade negotiations, cultural exchange, mutual respect. The official histories are lies. Kira pulled up more fragments, piecing together a narrative from corrupted data. Father found evidence of orbital bombardments, fleet actions, significant casualties on both sides. Then suddenly, peace, this treaty, and within a decade all mention of it vanished from public records. Jace felt pieces clicking into place. Someone rewrote history, made first contact peaceful, so no one would ask questions about the treaty that ended the war. But why? Sienna demanded. What about this treaty was worth hiding? Kira scrolled to another section, this one less corrupted. Her voice shook slightly as she read. The treaty established joint research facilities, combined human and Velisan teams studying biological compatibility, cultural integration, long-term cohabitation. It talks about genetic complementarity, about hybrid populations, about two species becoming one. The words hung in the air like a bomb. They were planning to merge our species, Sienna said quietly, to create something new. And someone stopped it, buried the treaty, rewrote history, maintained strict separation between our peoples for over a century. Jace looked between the sisters. Your father figured this out. He was going to expose it. So they destroyed him first. Kira's hands trembled on the datapad. They'll destroy anyone who knows. That's why Talrus is here. Not just to eliminate us, but to eliminate the evidence. Then we need to make sure the evidence survives even if we don't. Jace pulled up the comm system. We broadcast this to every independent network we can reach. Make it impossible to suppress. That'll put a target on your back too, Sienna warned. Already got one, might as well make it count. He started configuring the broadcast, but Kira stopped him with a hand on his arm. Wait, if we just dump raw data, they'll call it fabricated, claim it's propaganda or personal vendetta. Her eyes were sharp despite her physical weakness. We need context. We need to find the research facilities mentioned in the treaty, physical proof that can't be dismissed. Those facilities would have been dismantled or hidden over a century ago, Sienna objected. Maybe, or maybe they're still there, abandoned and forgotten. Kira pulled up the treaty document again, highlighting coordinates embedded in the text. These location markers, they reference a system that's now listed as uninhabitable. But what if that designation was intentional misdirection? Jace checked the coordinates against his navigation database. The system was 3 days away at maximum burn, deep in neutral space that technically belonged to no one. It's a long shot. It's our only shot, Kira countered. Raw data can be forged, but if we find actual facilities, actual evidence of joint human-Velisan research, that's undeniable. Sienna looked at Jace, and he saw the question in her eyes. This wasn't his fight. He could drop them at a station, walk away, let them handle their family's political problems while he went back to simple salvage work. But he thought about the treaty, about two species that had been kept artificially separate for over a century, about what might have been possible if that integration had continued, about the woman beside him who was learning to be something her culture said was impossible. We go to the coordinates, he decided, but we do it smart. We wait for Talrus to expand his search, slip out of this field, and make a run for neutral space before he realizes we're gone. He'll follow eventually, Sienna said. Then we better move fast. They waited another hour before the scouts' patrol pattern gave them an opening. Jace fired minimal thrusters, drifting out of the cave like debris rather than a powered vessel. They cleared the asteroid field using gravity assists and momentum, not engaging main engines until they were well beyond sensor range. Once they were clear, he pointed them toward the coordinates and engaged maximum burn. The ship shuddered slightly. His engines weren't designed for sustained high-speed operation, but they'd hold together long enough. Sienna remained at the sensor station, watching for pursuit. Kira had returned to the medical bay despite her protests, her body still too weak for extended activity. That left Jace and Sienna alone in the cockpit as the stars stretched into lines around them. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for not walking away. I made a commitment. 3 months. Your problems are my problems." This has become rather more complicated than simple resource exchange. Yeah, well, I've never been good at keeping things simple. He glanced at her. You handled yourself well during that chase. Your tactical assessments probably saved our lives. I was trained for fleet operations. Not flying through asteroid fields while being hunted by my own people." She paused. "But working with you felt natural, like we were operating as a unit rather than two separate entities trying to coordinate. Maybe that's what the treaty was really about, not just biological compatibility, but the way our species think differently enough to complement each other." Sienna moved closer, her hand finding his shoulder. "When this is over, if we survive, what happens to our arrangement?" "That depends on what you want. The protocol has terms, but those are just framework. What we make of it is up to us." She was quiet for a moment, then leaned against him, her cheek resting against his shoulder. "I don't know what I want yet, but I know I don't regret accepting your offer. Even with everything that's happened, I don't regret it." Jace wrapped an arm around her, and they watched the stars together as the ship carried them toward answers that might rewrite everything they thought they knew about their species' shared history. 3 days to the coordinates. 3 days before they'd know if Kira's theory was right. 3 days before Talrus caught up with them. The nav computer chimed, confirming their course. Jace settled in for the long burn, Sienna warm against his side, and tried not to think about how many ways this could go catastrophically wrong. The system appeared dead on approach. No orbital stations, no traffic beacons, no signs of habitation. Just a dim red dwarf star surrounded by lifeless rocks that had been marked uninhabitable for the past 90 years. Jace ran passive scans while Sienna cross-referenced the coordinates from the treaty document. Kira sat at the secondary console, still pale but insistent on helping, despite her sister's protests. "There," Kira pointed to a moon orbiting the system's largest gas giant. "That's the location marker from the treaty, but I'm not reading any structures. Run a deep scan. Look for anything artificial, even if it's buried or shielded." Jace adjusted their approach vector, bringing them closer to the moon. If these facilities were abandoned a century ago, they might be underground or camouflaged. The deep scan took 20 minutes, each second stretching as they waited for results. When the console finally chimed, all three of them leaned forward. "Electromagnetic signatures, faint but present," Sienna reported. "Subterranean cavern system with metallic structures. The readings suggest artificial construction covered by natural rock formation." Could be anything, old mining operation, forgotten outpost, but Jace's pulse quickened. Only one way to find out. He brought them down through the thin atmosphere, landing near the largest EM signature. The moon's surface was gray and desolate, scarred by ancient meteor impacts. But the rock formations here looked wrong, too regular, too precisely arranged. They suited up in the small airlock, checking seals and oxygen levels. Jace handed Sienna a spare sidearm, which she took with practiced efficiency. "Stay close to me," Sienna told Kira, "and if anything happens, you run back to the ship. Understood?" "I'm not leaving you." That wasn't a request, it was an order. Kira's jaw set stubbornly, but she nodded. They cycled through the airlock and stepped onto the moon's surface. Gravity was light, making movement bouncy and imprecise. Jace led them toward the rock formation, scanning for an entrance. "There," Sienna pointed to a gap between two massive stones. "That shadow's too deep to be natural." They squeezed through and found themselves in a tunnel that descended sharply into darkness. The walls were smooth, clearly carved rather than formed naturally, and as they moved deeper, lights flickered to life, emergency systems responding to their presence after decades of dormancy. The tunnel opened into a vast underground chamber. What they saw made all three of them stop. It was a research facility, perfectly preserved in the airless environment. Multiple levels connected by walkways and lifts, laboratory spaces visible through transparent walls, living quarters designed for long-term habitation, and throughout the facility, signs in both human and Velisan scripts. "It's real," Kira whispered. "It's all real." They descended into the facility, their suit lights cutting through the darkness. Jace's scanner showed stable atmosphere in the sealed sections. Whoever built this had designed it to last. The first laboratory they entered held equipment that looked both familiar and alien. Research stations designed for users of different heights and proportions. Sleeping pods sized for both human and Velisan physiology. recreational spaces with entertainment from both cultures. They lived here together, Sienna said, running her hand along a console. Worked together, shared spaces, integrated their lives. Kira moved to a data terminal and powered it up. The system groaned to life, ancient processors struggling to wake. When the display finally stabilized, she gasped. Research logs. Thousands of entries spanning 15 years. Medical data, genetic studies, psychological assessments. Her fingers flew across the interface. They weren't just studying compatibility. They were testing it, living it. Jace looked at the logs over her shoulder. Names in both human and Velasan formats. Couples, families, children born to mixed partnerships. An entire community built on the foundation of two species learning to be one. What happened to them? He asked. Kira scrolled through the final entries, her expression darkening. Evacuation order. Came from both governments simultaneously. The facility was to be abandoned within 48 hours, all research data transferred to sealed archives. She pulled up the last entry, dated 103 years ago. They were given no explanation, just orders to leave and never speak of what they'd done here. And they complied, Sienna said bitterly. They just walked away from everything they'd built. They were soldiers and scientists. They followed orders. Kira continued reading. But some of them left messages in the system, hidden files, personal logs, evidence they hoped someone would find someday. She opened one of the hidden directories. Video files appeared, dozens of them. Kira selected one at random and played it. A woman appeared on screen, human, middle-aged, wearing a researcher's uniform. Beside her stood a Velasan male, his hand resting on her shoulder with casual intimacy that would have been scandalous in current Velasan society. My name is Dr. Sarah Chen, the woman began. Jace felt Sienna tense beside him at the human name, then force herself to relax. My partner is researcher Davith Kren. We've worked at this facility for 8 years, studying human Velasan biological integration. We've made breakthroughs that could change both our species forever. Davith spoke next, his galactic standard carrying the melodic Velasan accent. We've proven that genetic combination is not only possible but beneficial. Hybrid children show enhanced cognitive abilities, superior immune systems, and psychological resilience that exceeds either parent species. They are the future both our peoples need. Sarah's expression turned sad. But our governments have decided fear is stronger than hope. They're shutting down the program, burying the research, erasing what we've accomplished. They claim it's for security, for species preservation. The truth is, they're afraid of change, afraid of losing control. So we're leaving this, Davith continued, evidence of what's possible when two species choose partnership over isolation. Someday someone will find it, and maybe then things will be different. The recording ended. Kira pulled up another, then another. Each showed similar stories, researchers and test subjects who'd built lives together, formed genuine bonds, created something new, and each expressed the same bitter disappointment at being forced to abandon it. There are children mentioned in these files, Kira said quietly. Hybrid children, first generation. What happened to them? Sienna moved to another terminal, searching through personnel records. Dispersed, adopted into single-species families, their origins classified. Some went to human colonies, some to Velasan worlds. Their true nature was hidden even from them. She looked up, her bioluminescent patterns flickering with anger. They were erased, made to forget what they were. Jace felt something cold settle in his gut. This wasn't just about hiding a treaty. They destroyed an entire generation of people who proved integration could work. And they've been maintaining that separation ever since, Kira added, keeping our species divided, feeding both sides propaganda about incompatibility, about the dangers of cross-species contact. But why? Sienna demanded. What do they gain from keeping us apart? Control, Jace said. Think about it. As long as humans and Velasan see each other as fundamentally different, fundamentally separate, the existing power structures remain intact. But if we start integrating, forming genuine partnerships, creating new cultures, everything changes, Kira finished. Political boundaries become meaningless. The councils and governments that rule through division lose their authority. A proximity alarm shrieked through their suit comms. Jace's external sensors showed a ship entering the moon's orbit. The Velasan scout, Talrus, finally catching up. "We need to go," Jace said. "Now." "Wait." Kira was downloading files frantically. "I need 5 more minutes to get everything." "We don't have 5 minutes." Sienna grabbed her sister's arm, physically pulling her away from the terminal. "Copy what you can to portable storage. We'll sort through it later." They ran for the exit, Kira clutching a data module she'd torn from the terminal. Behind them, the facility's lights began dying again, emergency power depleting. The tunnel stretched ahead, and Jace pushed himself faster despite the awkward low gravity. They emerged onto the surface to see the scout descending, its weapon ports opening. Jace's ship sat exposed, vulnerable. "Move," he shouted. They sprinted for the airlock. Plasma fire scorched the ground beside them, superheated rock exploding into fragments. Jace fired his sidearm at the scout, useless, but maybe enough to make them cautious, while Sienna and Kira reached the ship. Another shot, closer. The impact threw Jace forward, his suit screaming warnings about integrity breach. Pain lanced through his shoulder, but he kept moving. Sienna appeared in the airlock doorway, her weapon raised, laying down covering fire with remarkable accuracy. One shot struck the scout's sensor array, making it veer off momentarily. Jace hauled himself into the airlock. Sienna slapped the cycle control, and the outer door slammed shut as the scout made another pass. They felt the impact of weapons fire against their hull. "Get us out of here," Sienna shouted toward the cockpit. Kira was already in the pilot's seat, her fingers flying across the controls with desperate speed. The engines roared to life, and they lifted off hard, acceleration pressing them against the bulkheads. Jace struggled to his feet, his shoulder throbbing. Sienna caught him, supporting his weight. "You're hit." "I noticed. How bad?" She checked his suit's damage display. "Plasma burn, but it didn't penetrate all the way through. You'll need medical attention, but you're not dying immediately." "Good enough." They staggered to the cockpit, where Kira was piloting with the skill of someone who'd spent more time in simulators than they'd admitted. The scout was pursuing, but she was flying unpredictably, making their trajectory hard to predict. "Can you jump?" Jace asked through gritted teeth. "Not until we clear the gravity well. 30 more seconds." The scout fired again. Their aft shields flared, warning lights cascading across the console. Kira threw them into a spiraling climb, gaining altitude while making themselves a harder target. 20 seconds. Another impact, harder. Their shields buckled, and Jace felt the ship shudder. But Kira held their course, counting down. 10 seconds, 9-8. The scout was closing, positioning for a killing shot. Jace watched the weapons lock indicators spike, knowing they wouldn't make it. Then Sienna was at the weapons console, firing everything they had at the scout. Not trying to damage it, but forcing it to break off its attack run to evade. 3, 2, jump! Reality twisted, and they punched through into hyperspace. The scout disappeared behind them, unable to follow without coordinates. They'd escaped. For now, Jace let Sienna guide him to the medical bay, pain finally overwhelming adrenaline. She removed his suit with careful precision, revealing the plasma burn across his shoulder, angry red, blistered but treatable. "This is going to hurt," she warned, reaching for the medical supplies. "Just do it." She worked quickly, cleaning the wound and applying regenerative gel. Her touch was gentle despite her military efficiency, and he found himself watching her face rather than focusing on the pain. "You saved my life out there," he said. "You saved mine first. We're even." But her hand lingered on his uninjured shoulder, though I'd prefer neither of us needs saving in the future. Agreed. Kira appeared in the doorway, still clutching the data module. "I got most of the research files, medical data, genetic studies, personal logs, facility schematics, enough to prove everything." She looked between them. "Now what?" "Now we broadcast it," Jace said. "All of it, every network we can reach, make it impossible to suppress." "Talrus will keep hunting us," Sienna warned. "Then we stay ahead of him, and we make sure enough people see this that it doesn't matter if he catches us eventually." Sienna finished bandaging his shoulder and stepped back, her bioluminescent patterns flickering with something between fear and determination. This will change everything, for both our species. There's no going back once we do this. Jace met her eyes, seeing the woman she'd become over the past days, still proud, still strong, but no longer rigidly bound by her culture's limitations. Good, maybe it's time things changed.